This podcast is brought to you by the Ethical Society of St. Louis, being human together. The following recording is of a platform address presented to the Ethical Society of St. Louis by Dr. James Croft, entitled Doom Scrolling, How Social Media Stimulation Affects Our Brains and Our Society. It was recorded live on 11 April 2021. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, this presentation was given live over Zoom. If you would like to watch these platforms live, Sundays at 11 a.m. Central Time, go to our website, ethicalstl.org, for instructions.
Now, I'm about to talk to you about doom scrolling and our habitual social media use and how it can affect us in just a moment. But before I do, I wanted to begin by making a brief statement about last week's platform, because those who were present will know that our speaker presented some content which was not appropriate for our Sunday morning gathering. Now, I think we handled it pretty well as a community, with members offering some pointed and challenging questions about the content to the speaker. And I did break into his presentation to let him know that what he had shared was not appropriate for our audience. But I was disappointed that an invited speaker would share such an offensive clip, and it obviously didn't live up to our values as a community. Our platform team, a team which includes myself, Christian, and volunteer members, spend a large amount of time selecting and vetting speakers before we invite them to present to you. They're a very dedicated group and take the task very seriously. When we examine potential speakers, we look at the theme for the month and ask ourselves what we think our members might be interested to learn about. We consider questions of diversity and equity, making sure we feature a wide variety of voices. And we try to select presentations that we think will positively impact our members' lives. When we're considering a specific individual, we seek out videos of them speaking. We try to get testimonials from people who have heard them speak and consider whether they have spoken for an ethical society or similar group before. But we don't request to see their script or materials in advance, because honestly, that is neither practical nor in keeping with our commitment to freedom of speech, expression, and thought. Last week, the speaker had a large amount of video content on their website, had spoken to ethical societies previously, and came highly recommended. So we felt confident that he would provide an appropriate and enjoyable presentation. I want to apologize, though, to anyone who was offended by elements of his presentation, and I hope you feel like we responded in a way in keeping with our values. I've received some emails from some of you about it. I'm happy to receive any questions or thoughts from you further. Just email me at jcroft@ethicalstl.org and I'd be happy to chat with you about it. I will try to ensure that nothing in my presentation today makes you want to turn off. So, doom scrolling. Let me paint you a picture. I'm lying awake at night. It's not too late, but not too early either. 11:30 maybe. I'm on my phone. I'm scrolling through Twitter or my news feed on Facebook, or just using the CNN app. I just want to know what's going on. I see some funny memes. Many of us have probably had this experience working from home recently. I see some cute pet pictures. Yes, that is Ella, the famous puppy. And then I see some piece of bad news. Perhaps it's a volcanic eruption on the island of St. Vincent. Perhaps it's attacks on the right to vote in Georgia. Perhaps it's that Prince Philip has died which means the Queen is surely on her way out, which will lead to the collapse of the Commonwealth and the diminishment of the UK's role in the world. Okay, well, maybe that wouldn't be so bad, but still, whatever the bad news is, it prompts me to seek out more information. I need to know more about this bad thing that's happening. What's happening to those poor islanders evacuating to avoid the volcano? What is the history of voter suppression efforts in the UK? How might Prince Philip's death affect the monarchy? Quickly, I'm dragged into a destructive spiral, a piece of bad news leading me to seek out more bad news until I'm sucked into a black hole of negativity. When I finally look up from my phone, anxious and miserable, it's past 2 a.m. We now have a word for this, and it is doom scrolling. The term, which exploded in popularity during the coronavirus while we were all shut in our homes, frantically seeking information about what was going on, refers to the self-destructive behavior of, as NPR reporter Lulu Garcia-Navarro put it, binging on bad news. Clearly, this behavior is bad for us. It encourages us to focus on the negative rather than the positive, and it can skew our perception of the world, leading us to think that things are worse and the world is more dangerous than it really is. Garcia Navarro quotes clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Aldao, who explains, "Our minds are wired to look out for threats. The more time we spend scrolling, the more we find those dangers, the more we get sucked into them, the more anxious we get. Now you look around yourself and everything feels gloomy. Everything makes you anxious. So you go to look for more information." This is a vicious cycle of negativity, which can alter our outlook, making us more anxious, less hopeful, and less happy. Why do we doom scroll? If doom scrolling makes us unhappy, why do we do it? Why do so many of us compulsively seek out negative information and news stories if it's a detriment to us? Surely, once we realize we're doing something which isn't adding anything positive to our life, we would stop, right? But as with so many destructive behaviors, we don't. Why is that? Well, that quote from Dr. Aldao gives one reason: we're hardwired to seek out threats. Our ancestors were more likely to survive if they were attuned to potential threats in the environment. And so that quality was passed down to us via evolution. And now we are active threat detectors who look out for potential danger in our environment. But evolution is a blunt tool, and over the millennia, we've become oversensitive to threats. Briefly put, it's more dangerous for an animal to fail to perceive a threat, a false negative, believing that there is no threat when there actually is one, than for an animal to think there is a threat when there isn't one, a false positive. If our ancestors thought, hey, that's a tiger, when they saw the bushes rustle and then ran away, even though in that case it was just the wind, well, then not much harm is done. They waste some energy, but it's not a big deal. If instead they saw the rustling of the bushes and thought, meh, it's probably just the wind, when it was in fact a tiger, well, then they wouldn't be your ancestors, right? So as psychologist Dr. Sarah Gingold puts it, there is no evolutionary reward for being relaxed in the face of danger. On the contrary, being suspicious of the merest hint of danger and reacting vigorously to every possible threat could be life-saving. Those psychological mechanisms which helped our ancestors survive have become part of us today. We tend to be hypervigilant, perceiving real danger when really often there is none. The honest truth is that for most of us, even very bad news we read while scrolling on our phones is unlikely to be immediately threatening. Perhaps if there's a tornado in our immediate vicinity, we should be alarmed and take immediate action. But if we're reading about a political problem in a different state, sure, we should get informed and politically engaged, but we shouldn't necessarily feel a sense of physical threat or psychological distress. Yet often we do, and that can harm our mental health. So our overactive threat detectors set us up to doom scroll. This in turn can lead to a psychological cycle which is difficult to break. Since if we become even mildly depressed, we tend to seek out information which makes us more so. Psychologist Dr. Albers says that if you're depressed, you often look for information that can confirm how you feel. And if you're feeling negative, then reading negative news reconfirms how you feel. And this can make doom scrolling a habit. Our overactive threat detectors make us more interested than we should be in the negative news. This makes us feel worse about the world. Then we seek out more news to confirm our negative feelings. And soon, if we're not careful, we're reaching for the phone every night before we go to bed, ready for our daily hit of negativity. But the third reason why we doom scroll is particularly insidious and particularly relevant to our month on stimulation. It's because social media sites and apps are designed to keep us using them. Now, before I go into this, I don't want to get all conspiracy theory on you. There isn't some massive global conspiracy to distract you with kitten memes so that we forget all about what's going on in the world. And nor is there a global conspiracy to overwhelm you with bad news to make you feel so down about things that you feel powerless and don't do anything. This is not some great political conspiracy meant to distract or disempower us from what's going on. No, this is simple capitalism at work. Social networks make money by harvesting and selling our data and through advertising. So the more we use their services, the more we see ads and the more data they have about us to sell. And therefore, the more time we spend using these sites, the more money they make. It's as simple as that. It's in the direct interests of Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, etc., to keep us scrolling, because that's the only way they make money. As tech writer Catherine Price put it, with social media, we are not the customers, which is how we often feel. Instead, advertisers are the customers, and our attention is what's being sold. In a very real way, on social media, we are the product, not the consumer. And because of this, social networks have become amazingly sophisticated at stimulating us in just the right ways to keep us engaged. One of the most obvious ways they do this is through targeted advertising. You've almost certainly seen this if you use the internet at all. You need a new pair of shoes, so you do an internet search for shoes. And not long after, your Facebook feed is flooded with adverts for, yes, shoes. It's an amazing coincidence. This is an incredibly obvious form of manipulation, which social media networks have been perfecting for some time now. Right now, I've been buying cards for the popular game Magic the Gathering. Yes, I am a huge nerd. And my Facebook feeds and Google searches are filled with deliciously tempting ads for, yes, more Magic the Gathering cards. I see them everywhere. I cannot escape them. And I'll tell you a secret, I'm not even mad about it. I kind of like that they advertise to me in this way. That's how much they've got me. Social networks do this with other types of content too, though, which is not stuff that you buy, but stuff that keeps you engaged with their platform. Twitter will recommend people to follow based on your followership habits. YouTube will recommend channels and videos based on what you've watched before. Facebook will recommend people to add as friends based on your current connections, and content based on the sort of content that you share. And TikTok, well, I don't know what TikTok does. I'm much too old to be on there. No, I am actually on TikTok. And TikTok will recommend videos for you to watch and content creators for you to follow based on what you've watched before. I don't know what it says about me, but today TikTok offered this guy for me to follow in my For You feed, which is specifically designed to be stuff curated just for you. But I'll tell you something hilarious. I went to TikTok just to get an example of what it would recommend for this presentation. I foolishly watched the video and then ended up spending 15 minutes scrolling through the other videos that they recommended for me. Well played, TikTok. Well played. And this is, of course, exactly what these companies want. They want us to keep using their product because that's how they make money. But it goes deeper still. The very structure of these social media apps, how their sites are built, how they present information to us, is constantly being optimized to maximize the amount of time we spend with them. Think of those shelves of candy bars at the grocery store. Those racks of Snickers and Tic Tacs which flank you as you line up to pay. There's a lot of psychological research behind why those are there. They are placed there because they are sweet, inexpensive impulse purchases, which research shows you are quite likely to pick up and add to your cart if you have to stare at them for a couple of minutes. And let me tell you, they always get me with the Tic Tacs. If I'm addicted to anything, it is Tic Tacs. I'll eat a whole huge box of them in an hour easily. I love Tic Tacs. I love everything about them. Ooh, the sound they make. The physical layout of the grocery store is designed to maximize the amount of money you spend. And in an exactly similar way, the layout of social media apps on your screen, whether it's on your computer or it's on your phone, is designed to maximize the amount of time you spend there. This is a rather long quote from an article from the BBC about this, but it articulates the point so well that I thought I'd share it in full. Consider the pull to refresh feature common to social media apps, where dragging down on the screen prompts the screen to refresh. Not only is the action itself similar to pulling the lever on a slot machine, but it takes advantage of our attraction to unpredictability. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcements. Sometimes when we check social media, there's something exciting waiting for us, a reward, and sometimes there's not. It's the unpredictability, not knowing what's going to appear when we pull down on the screen to refresh, that keeps us coming back. Then, once you're trapped in a spiral of scrolling, social media apps don't want you to look up. That's why their feeds are deliberately designed to be endless. This is fascinating. I never thought about this before I read this article. Posts on your newsfeed could be presented as pages, just like Google search results. But then you would have to do something active, click through to the next page in order to continue, which is exactly what the app designers want to avoid. So video platforms like YouTube and Netflix automatically start playing the next video or episode in your queue within seconds of the previous video's end. Sure, you could press stop, but wouldn't it be easier to keep watching? The article goes on to explain how many of those tricks manipulate our brain's dopamine system, the system which regulates the neurotransmitter which helps us form habits. It turns out that engagement with social media triggers the sense of happiness and satisfaction so that over time it can become a habit. When people like our Facebook posts or YouTube videos, the social network lets us know, and we get a little hit of dopamine. That makes us feel good. So we seek out the stimulus more, posting more, and spending more and more time online. This in itself isn't much of a problem. After all, face-to-face interactions also trigger the same reward pathways in the brain, encouraging us to have positive relationships with others in meet space. That's why we have those systems and why they trigger positively to social interaction at all. But social media apps and networks like Facebook and Twitter are hyper-social environments. They are environments with potentially millions of connections available to us, way more than we could ever properly interact with offline. And therefore, the opportunities for habit-forming dopamine loops are much greater online than offline. And at least from the social media executives' perspective, the design of their sites is working. Here is a chart that shows the daily time spent on social networking by internet users worldwide from 2012 to 2020. And you can see that the average social media use per day has increased steadily over the past 10 or so years from about 90 minutes per day in 2012 to 145 minutes per day now, 2 hours a day. For many of us, social media use has become a habit, taking more and more of our time, less and less under our conscious control, and perhaps, as with doom scrolling, not even making us particularly happy. So we're hardwired for threat detection and tend to be a bit over-vigilant to potential threats. If we're in a negative state of mind, we tend to seek out information which reinforces our negativity. And social media is consciously designed to keep us spending as much time as possible on it, harnessing the natural reward systems of our body to encourage us to form a social media habit. Doom scrolling intensifies. Doom scrolling and other forms of compulsive social media use is not good for us. The compulsive use of social media to find more and more bad news about the world has been shown to increase our anxiety, decrease our life satisfaction, negatively affect our sleep, and in extreme cases can lead to depression or even suicidality. And I think this makes sense. If we're filling our time with negative news we can do truly nothing about, that would lead to feelings of helplessness and despair, right? And all these problems have been exacerbated due to the pandemic, a time in which our opportunities for offline social engagement have diminished, and often our phones and our computers have become the only link we have to our friends and family. Now, I don't know about you, but my social media use skyrocketed during lockdown as I searched for every last bit of news about the virus and everything else in a frantic attempt to get a handle on what was going on. At the beginning of the pandemic, I checked the rates of transmission in St. Louis every day. I watched every daily update from the Department of Health. I shouted at the screen whenever the mayor came on. Hopefully that'll change soon. And it wasn't healthy. It didn't really help me effectively deal with the stress of the pandemic. And it wasn't even actually the best way to stay informed about it. Even the World Health Organization has warned about the negative potential effects of doom scrolling during the pandemic, encouraging us to minimize our reliance on endless social media news feeds, to seek information only at specific times of day and then only once or twice, and to limit our screen time. And how many of us are effectively doing that? I know some of our members are not really internet people, and they're listening to this being like, yep, I'm totally good. I never go on Facebook, don't even have an account. What even is Twitter? But I think many of us are probably experiencing some of these same challenges. Now, the jury is out regarding whether we should properly speak of social media addiction. Some psychologists argue that this is a real condition, that we can become at least behaviorally addicted to social media use. Others argue that this is a conclusion that is too dramatic and premature, and that the term addiction is best reserved for much more serious and debilitating conditions. Some point out that social media is replacing much of our offline communication, like time spent on the phone, for instance, and that it's merely becoming the predominant mode of interpersonal contact at a distance. And would we really want to have spoken about phone addiction a few decades ago? But whether social media addiction is the right term to use or not, it's clear that many of us struggle with doom scrolling and other habitual uses of social media. I definitely struggle with it. They say that preachers tend to preach sermons they themselves need to hear, and I am certainly doing that this morning. Speaking personally, I know that my social media use has grown to take up too much of my life, particularly over the past year. iPhones have a feature on them called Screen Time, which records how much time you spend using your phone or iPad each day. And I was shocked when I checked it just to see my screen time for last week in purpose of preparing for this presentation. I was actually going to show you the little graph it gives you of how much screen time you've used each day, but I was too embarrassed. It was so much, I was too embarrassed. Like, given the fact that I do all my work on a computer, that I do all my reading now on an iPad, all my articles, all my books and everything, this will put this in a bit of context for you, so don't judge me too harshly. But according to my phone, also I just leave it on lying around, so that probably affects it. But according to my phone, I spent an average of 12 hours and 34 minutes a day using a screen last week. And that is too much, even for Netflix binging, video game playing me. So how do we stop? How do we get control of our social media habit instead of it controlling us? Well, the first thing I think we should do is forgive ourselves. A lot of people feel ashamed about how much they use social media, and I think you shouldn't, especially now. So as ethical humanist clergy, I am formally offering you absolution. This has been a very difficult year for many of us, so no surprise if, for you, it's resulted in increased social media consumption and some associated bad habits. It's fine. It's nothing that can't be changed. Changing habits is hard, but it's not impossible. But how do we change those habits? Well, I'm going to offer a couple of thoughts today that have been helpful to me, but I'd really like to hear how you try and regulate your social media use in the discussion afterwards. For me, it's mostly about becoming more aware of how I'm spending my time and replacing social media time with something else that I value. I don't delete my social media accounts. I still have accounts on Facebook and Twitter, etc. I haven't gone cold turkey, and the evidence suggests that doesn't work anyway. But what I've done instead is I have removed those apps from my phone, the Twitter app, the Facebook app. Now, when I want to use Facebook or when I want to use Twitter, I do so only on my PC when I'm sitting down at a computer or a laptop. So I'm not carrying it around with me everywhere. And that on its own enabled me to cut down dramatically my Facebook and Twitter usage. Anyone who follows me on Facebook, you can confirm if it's true that I post less on Facebook than I used to. Secondly, I try, and this is so difficult for me, but I try to ask myself regularly if the activity I'm engaged in is giving me pleasure anymore. The scariest thing about doom scrolling for me is how mindless it becomes, how it becomes something I just do, not something that I want to do. I don't feel like I'm in control of my own actions fully. So I try to periodically ask myself, are you enjoying this right now? What is this giving you? Just scheduling a self-check-in after every article or post can help break the compulsive cycle, because often when I remember to ask that question, I think, actually, no, I'm not really getting anything from this. So I can put it down and I won't lose anything. That's all I really wanted to achieve with this platform. I wanted to have you give a moment to check in about your social media use. As the vaccine is distributed, and we look forward to the opportunity to reconnect with each other offline, and I am so looking forward to it, I wanted to make sure we have a moment to evaluate our social media usage and see whether for us it is healthy. I am the last person to be judgmental about other people's social media practices. I'm probably the worst offender in this whole Zoom meeting. But I think that if we can stop doom scrolling, then we should. Thank you.
You have been listening to a platform address presented to the Ethical Society of St. Louis by our leader, Dr. James Croft, on 11 April 2021. To hear other platform addresses, to learn more about our society, the ethical culture movement, or to donate to support our society, please visit our website at ethicalstl.org. Until next time, thank you for listening.